What's up, everyone? I dyed my hair black, so if you saw the original profile picture, that's outdated. But yeah, I'm not actually an iOS developer. A little unfortunate. So why am I here? I don't have a job either, but I do have a few observations and magic tricks I want to show you. The first of this is about the world becoming more minimalistic, monochromatic. I think that in general, we see a lot of things becoming blander. These are some images of the world that I found, some lampposts, some benches, some doors, some buildings, and McDonald's. You can see that in general, we've been leaning towards just simplification of everything. Some of you guys might have seen these images of rebrands of all these fashion brands and tech company logos and whatnot. A lot of them, before you could say, oh wow, there was some character, lots of elegance. Now it kind of looks like I just took out some sans serif font, typed whatever. And then I also found some images of social media apps, social apps. And it's kind of hard to tell them apart from each other. It's like all of them kind of the same structure, same visuals, very white, very black. Makes sense, right? Just because like you kind of understand the utility of these apps. But there is something to say about how just the information structure and everything, it's very similar. A lot of colors are extracted out. Some of us here might be old enough to remember the colored days of Instagram, but now it's very much black and white in the actual user interface, other than the media content, of course. And so why is this? You can blame capitalism, industrial revolution, all of those. But in general, I just think that like when you're building software, or when you're building anything for, as a business, just the systems, the incentives, it makes it really hard for you to do anything other than just maximizing shareholder value. And that you're trying to get as much quantity, reliability for the cheapest price. So that's what's going on, and then you profit. And so that's just one observation about the world. And so an example of this, I think, is Facebook. I think is a very good example. I think it's probably the app, or I don't even know if you can call it just an app. It's a huge company, but the Facebook app itself is the #1 most used app in my opinion. It has 3 billion monthly active users, which is a lot. And when you're serving users at that scale, the type of trade-offs that you need to make are very different from the type of trade-offs I would make if I'm making just an app as a startup. In that, for example, in the visual design of Facebook, you might notice that they don't have a lot of border radiuses. And one story I heard from their vice president of design is that that's because, if you're trying to run all of these consistently on low-end Android devices and you have all these border radiuses and you have to render that, there's a performance trade-off that they're not willing to make. So that's an example of an app that's trying to serve everyone. And because of that, it needs to be very precisely systemized. And on top of that, you can just imagine what kind of organization and team and development processes they need to have. In that they probably have, let's say, 1,000 designers or something, right? No exaggeration, somewhere around that scale. And how do you align that many people to build the same things? Well, you systemize a lot of things, build a lot of tools around there, talk a lot about design systems. But and that scale, by the way, I think is probably more designers than all the top Korean companies and their designers combined or something like that, right? But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are legitimate cases where you should simplify, systemize all these things. But when your product is not for everyone, or it'd be better to serve a very specific audience, and you're trying to do everything as if you're serving everyone, you kind of get these stale experiences that just you look at the state of the world of product design and all the software apps, and they kind of work the same, they feel the same, and there's not much more to it. So that was kind of the first observation that I had. The second, a lot of people are talking about AI, the impact, all these other second order effects, and a lot of them are pretty dumb takes. And I'm trying to also make a few dumb takes as well. But there's just two things I just want to point out, which is that The first thing, it just feels like all single-player experiences will be replicable, and that a lot of interfaces won't be necessary anymore. So what I mean by the first point, all single-player experiences will be replicable, is that, like, here's the way I would put it. Like, if you could sit down at a desk, open up your laptop, write code, and build something, eventually language models will be able to do the same. Like, I think that in general, like, this is probably not full per point. If I tweeted this, a lot of people would probably, raise pitchforks or whatnot at me. But, it's generally a lot of the code that we write, a lot of the interfaces that we're making, a lot of that work, it'll be instantly replicable. And so I'll just show you a quick example of what I mean by this. I think that not all of us are aware of the state of AI and how tools are developing. And I think that this is worth pointing out. So I'll just do a quick demo. And by the way, I'm just demoing state-of-the-art tools, not what I made. But here's Claude. Do any of us here use Claude? Few people, not everyone. But I'll just say something like, make a tool that allows me to manipulate the box shadow of a circle. Give me sliders for X, Y, radius, shadow opacity. And this is a really simple prompt. And I know we're in an iOS meetup right now, but this is going to write a React component because Claude is based on the web. And it's writing some code. And crazily enough, you can just see how instantly, just with one line of prompt, I just got this tool for myself where I can just play around with the visuals of a box shadow. And you can, this is a very simple utility. But there are a lot of apps out there right now where a lot of people put hours in to try to craft something like a simple tool or a simple function solving a simple problem. And I guess the point here is that, like, yeah, a lot of those things will be instantly replicable. You can just generate it, and we'll get to a world where people just start generating their own tools. So given that, I think that it's, we should probably understand like what kind of software we should aim to build in the future. Like, how do you create unique experiences in a world where everything becomes copyable, replicable? And this is not a foolproof list, but here's a framework for how I think about it. I think that if you have unique data, and you can train unique models off of that unique data, then like you can probably create experiences that other people can't. And so, like, if let's say you're working on image models and you just have all these images that other image models just don't have, like they just won't be able to create the same results, right? The second is network effects. So like if I could create a really great iOS app that's like better than Instagram for photo sharing, but if my friends are not sharing photos on that app, like there's no point of that app really existing. And then there's brand IP distribution. Like I could create an app about cartoons and like entertainment, but like it's not going to beat whatever Disney puts out. And then I think that for a lot of iOS engineers, client engineers, there is this like some term where AI won't be able to do a lot of things, or AI can't do a lot of things. And that area for me, I think about it in novel interactions, shaders, and experiences with sensors. And for some of these, I hope to show you more about it today. And we were just looking at Apple Intelligence and how it got delayed. But eventually all the delays pass. Eventually, what I believe will end up happening is that you can just see from the screenshot right here, your mom's flight lands at 11 a.m. and it gives some information about a flight. To me, this little module makes the United Airlines app pretty much unnecessary. In that if your software is about data transaction, like you're trying to get information, you're trying to send information, and that's pretty much, that's kind of the basis of a lot of software today. A lot of that, the actual user interfaces will be abstracted away just because it's probably more convenient for that type of navigation, information structure, all of that to not exist, and for you to just get the information you want right away in the best structure. So what does this all mean? I just gave you a bunch of statements on the world, how it's getting simpler on AI, how I think that single player apps are kind of in trouble, and these are the things that we should look out for. So one way to talk about it is that AI allows software to get built faster, cheaper, with a smaller team. And like, I think the world is obsessed about this. Everyone's talking about like, hey, like we can, instead of having like 100 people development team, we can have 20 people. We can do it in a week instead of like a month. But for me, the way I think about it is that this seems like a pretty low standard to live by. In that, like, yeah, like we can already create the apps that we do today. Like, what's the point in us having like 10 more of those apps, right? Like, it's like, does that really change the outcomes? I think the way we should think about it is that it enables a higher standard of software. And the best analogy I have for this is cars. So, we used to ride horses, and cars came along, and then we no longer needed to ride horses. And like, at that point it was probably pretty great where it's like, yeah, I used to go from from Mary's house to like Jane's house on a horse, and like now I can do that like 3 times faster with a car without having to like care for the horse. Like I'm sure it allowed people to move faster, but it wasn't just like we were going the same destination, point A to point B, the same destinations, just with a different device, right? Like because cars came out, we started traveling to different places. We could now go very far, right? Like we can do road trips. We can, we even have like F1, like, a whole ecosystem of just like entertainment in cars. We now have autopilot with cars so that, you don't even have to kind of drive while you're going from, your origin to destination. So that's an example of how I think that that's an example of new technology just enabling a whole different set of experiences that I think that we ignore. It's not, I don't think that we should be talking about like, hey, how do we make software cheaper? How do we, make it faster and like automate it? I think it should just be actually about like, how do we create the best possible thing now that we don't have to do all the, other stuff as much. So a higher standard of software. I think that's kind of what I want to share with you today, try to demonstrate it. It's a pretty vague thing. Everybody has different standards and different values to live by. But Andy from Not Boring Apps, who created this really beautiful weather app, I think he captured it really perfectly. And I'm sure, like by a raise of hands, like how many people have seen this app before? Oh, that's a very few hands. Okay, I want all of you guys to download it when you guys get home and try to not cry at how beautiful the app is. But he says, we should see the work of product design as more than a business optimizer, but as a powerful vehicle for expressing ideas that can push culture forward. That to me, like it really resonates at my heart, where it's not just about the business, the function, but about culture and experience. And so I try to do this. I try to, I told you I'm not really an iOS engineer. I don't know what the difference of a struct and a class is, like very honestly, but I try to make a mini app to try to capture some of these principles and values. And so how many of you guys here post on Instagram, particularly stories? How many of you guys are like uploading stories on a weekly basis? Just by a raise of hands? Yeah. Okay, that's a very, very low audience as well. Oh, wow. You guys are all offline. All right, well, I post a lot on Instagram, and one of the things that I just thought was really odd is that an iPhone takes a picture at 3:4 aspect ratio, Instagram uploads at 9:16. And to me, like Instagram stories is probably one of the most common functions that people use with their camera, and this was like a WTF moment for me. Like, what's going on, right? Just 2 most common use cases that are just incompatible. And so, I don't think this was the right slide. Give me just a second, everybody. There we go. So there's a couple apps out there, photo editing apps that kind of try to solve this thing. The left is Pixar, the right is Epic from Snow. And we call this outpainting. So you take an image and then you can expand an image with an AI model. And to be honest, I think that there's a lot to ask for, but there's 2 things I think that I just think is pretty problematic. And by the way, on the left side, Pixar actually worked there, designed some of the creation flows, so I feel a little comfortable critiquing it. But the first thing I think is, I mean, these are very complex apps. Like both of them, probably the biggest in their markets, right? Pixar's worth more than $1 billion, has more than 100 million active users. But it takes somebody like 10 taps to get through this flow. The second thing is that just by nature of like what it takes for to do AI inference, it's like you have to wait, and they just show you these like loading screens where you're just like holding your phone for like 20 seconds and not doing anything. And to me, this was like really analogous to like the elevator problem. Some of you might be familiar with it, but the idea was that when elevators were first invented, like people would go into this like small box and they would feel very claustrophobic while it was making all these noise and like vibrations. Like they were very unsure. It made them very nervous. And so all the engineers suddenly they got this feedback where it's like, hey, can you make the elevator faster? Like, can you like fix whatever? Like, it makes me uncomfortable, right? And the actual solution to that wasn't making the elevator faster. It was adding mirrors to the elevator. And then suddenly people were like, oh man, like the elevator rides are so short. Like it's the same exact time that it takes for an elevator to go from, between the floors. But I think there was something about perception that just with good design, good layouts that, the elevator engineers were able to do. And so I think something similar exists for AI, where right now it takes a lot of, just based on compute, like we need to wait. But maybe there's a better way to do it, right? And so, by the way, this is just the quick demonstration of like what it looks like for all of you non-Instagram users. Like this is the normal picture on the left. This is kind of like what it looks like when you upload it. It crops out the sides, makes you zoom in. And then the unfortunate result is that you get this like blank space on the top and the bottom if you try to zoom out, and it just looks really bad. But yeah, speaking of the elevator problem, what if it could just be you just select the photo, and it just extends the photo the moment you select it, and we only made one tap, and then as soon as you just wait a few seconds, like you just get the full image, right? And I just showed you that it's fully expanded as an AI image. So to me, this was just like a quick take at trying to create a distinguished AI experience that's very convenient for the user. Like it should just be one tap. We should just understand what the users want, do all of those things, as well as make it feel very interesting. You don't have to, it doesn't feel like you're in this like claustrophobic room, like elevator waiting. And now, just going into the deep dives of some of the details, I think some of you might find interesting, some of you guys might not find interesting. But one of the problems, I think, with any sort of AI software right now is that models are probabilistic, in that if you put in an input, you kind of don't know what output you're gonna get. Like if you type in similar prompts to GPT, you might get different results. In image models, particularly in this outpainting, you can see how for every single different trial I did, you get different shoes. And this is a pretty sensitive issue for a lot of Instagram users, where it's like, yeah, like I don't want to be seen wearing these like sandals or like these like brown shoes, like And so what's the solution, right? Like today, what a lot of software, a lot of apps make people do is you just spam the regeneration, you just spam the prompt until you kind of get whatever you want. It's like a lottery. Like you just keep spinning the slot machine until you get it. And so I wanted to try to solve this. One way to think about it is that we can just get better models, right? And so for that, like my friend and I, we started working on all these ways to just like change clothing in a picture. So maybe like if we just had good virtual try-on models, like you can just like get the shoe that you want. And like, yeah, that's one way to think about it. Like you just get better models. And we were training all these photos. You can, all of these photos are fake, by the way. These are all generated with our model. But you can see that how these generate clothes and shoes very well. So this is one approach to like improving that type of experience, which is like, you just make everything better, right? Just the actual brain of the AI. But maybe the other way to think about it, especially for most of us who I imagine are just like client engineers who don't have a say on what to do with the AI stuff. Maybe we just need better ideas, more creativity, and different solutions to try. And so one way that I try to approach this is, what if we can detect the pose and just not draw the shoe? Right, so you run pose detection on it. You can see here that the detector detects, hey, like the person's knees are here, but the ankles are not there, and you can probably estimate wherever the ankles are. And we were using MediaPipe for this, just because with Blaze Pose, it gives you an estimation of where the ankles are, And happy to explain all the details someday. I think that running this on iOS was, I didn't leave my house for 3 weeks, didn't see sunlight, that type of thing. But anyways, like once you detect the person's pose, you can kind of see like, hey, okay, like we're gonna extend exactly until the ankle. We're not gonna draw any shoes, and then the rest of it could be the sky, right? And you just get a perfect result, right? So this is like a really great way where I was like, oh wow, like you can create something where people don't have to care about shoes and like regenerate it like 20 times. And with this, by the way, I think if you remember the earlier motion, we sent the image, scaled it up to the center of the screen, extended it one-to-one from the top and the bottom, extend the same amount. And it was just like really beautiful, like I call it the elevator animation, right? But the problem here is that like now we're dynamically detecting how much of the top we should extend, how much of the bottom we should extend. So like, what should we do with the animation, right? And so this is, the left side is what we had before. The right side is what we have now. The left side, you can see how it just goes to the center of the screen, extends top and bottom evenly, and that's just like what was happening. But this would draw the shoe. So to animate not drawing the shoe, you can see how here we're doing this, we're doing a couple of different things here. And so, we were working on all these animation challenges like, hey, so let's say the total transition duration, we have 300 milliseconds for it. To detect the pose, maybe it takes 80 milliseconds, right? The x-axis with animation, we would do the same. But for the rest of it, after the pose gets detected, we need to hijack the animation. And so you can kind of see, I guess here you could probably see it better. The left is the normal one, the right here, the red circle represents the center of the image, the original image, obviously, and then the green and the blue, they're just the top and bottom. So so I think that we're trying to do all these intelligent things behind the scenes, try to make it as intuitive as possible, as natural, undetectable for the user, and that just required all these different animation techniques to try to make it physically consistent. But then another thought hit us, which is like, so the solution to the shoe problem is no shoes. Like that felt kind of weird in that like, so the original problem, I remind you, was like people were getting all these different shoes that just wasn't actually what they were wearing or what they wanted to wear. But then to say like the solution's like, hey, you're not gonna get any shoes felt kind of weird, right? It's like people should have the option to customize, have, the freedom to not just take what, it's not gonna always work. Like these type of AI inferences, like they're not always foolproof. So you wanna have backup. And so this is what we came up with. This is a whole new mental model for how we think about outpainted images, which is like Legos. So the center is the original image, and then for the top and the bottom, you can just mix and match. You can just swipe through, and it's kind of like looking through a closet, right? You can see how on the bottom with the different shoes, I'm just swiping through it. And then when you swipe on the middle, it swipes both the top and the bottom, both at the same time. And so this is really great in that it solves the problem of like, hey, I don't like these shoes, because you can kind of see multiple and compare them. And then the really great thing is that like you can just outpaint this region. So you can make the image outpainted here very tall, so that like if somebody just doesn't want shoes in it, they can just move it afterwards in Instagram, right? Like this is just we just did all these behind the scenes computations so that like the user can do whatever they want and have the full flexibility and whatnot. So I mean, I showed you a bunch of different takes that we did for this little mini app. And there were a few key learnings I just want to summarize. There was the elevator problem. Like how do we make wait more enjoyable without actually, because we have a limitation on how fast we can make things. There's a shoe problem, and to me that taught me, hey, actually, creativity is the scarcity, not just compute. We had some learnings, lessons, as I showed you, on just like how to do better craft, fluidity, spatial interactions. And overall, I think that the place I encourage all of us is just thinking in new mental models. Like we're working with new technology when it comes to AI. We should probably step outside of our previous bounds of how we think about things. And so this is now available on TestFlight. It's not fully on the App Store yet. Hopefully it'll be there in like the next week or two, but if anybody wants to, scan the QR code. I know even though none of you guys post on Instagram. feel free.
Can you save the image after scanning?
Yeah. Oh, I'll give it another second.
Does it work like a share? I'll wait for the questions.
Oh yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, and then I just want to go through fast on some of these demos, other demos that I thought would be kind of cool for anybody who's working on iOS stuff. So one of the, I'm just really into cameras and photos lately. One of the problems that I wanted to figure out is like, when people take like 50 photos on their camera, like it's really hard for you to compare all the different photos and like see like which one you like. And it's just this really terrible flow where you're like swiping through, pressing the favorite button and like trying to filter through it, right? So these are just a couple prototypes where it's like, how can you compare like a very specific part of the photo all at once? So the left side, it's like, I just press my thumb, I can move it around, and you can see how it compares the same part of different images all at once. The middle, but then the problem with the left side prototype is that like when you're hovering over this, you actually hide you end up hiding the photo with your thumb, right, or with your finger. And so maybe there's a different way where we added this like little trackpad here where you can like move your thumb around here and still get the same experience. And then the last one, it's really boring. You just add a switch and then just move it around after you toggle. And then similar to that note of just like comparing different images, we also made this one where live photo is one of my favorite technologies, but nobody really cares about it. And the thing that it bothers me about is like, you take a photo, you have this scene data, like a second and a half before, second and a half after, and you just have so much data about the scene, but nobody really uses those alternate frames because it's really low quality. So this is an example of AI application where it's like, hey, what if we just took that video, sliced it apart, upscaled it, denoised it, color corrected it. It probably takes a couple seconds per each frame. How do we make the wait more enjoyable? So it kind of has this type of fun experience where you're just like watching it through as your photos get upscaled live, and it just gives you the comparison, right? Cameras. So I was telling you about MediaPipe, and this is just a way to do real-time ML inference. I think that some of you might use Core ML. I don't know what everybody's familiarity with like that is, but I personally find Core ML to be pretty insufferable. I think that the great thing on MediaPipe is basically that you get to run your own TensorFlow models on it and try to write your own logic. So I wanted to show you a couple demos with what you can do and try to paint a vision for you guys on like where real-time ML is going. But I need a volunteer I need a volunteer basically because I need to take photos of you because we're working on a camera app. Yeah, do you want to just come and stand? And I mentioned to you I don't actually know how to code very well. I don't know iOS, so how did I make this? And I just want to give you a quick example of just like, I just want to basically give you a brain dump of all the tools I've been using so that maybe you can take away the same things, right? So let's say, so basically, if you guys are not paying for GPT and Claude right now, I recommend that you pay for both. It's alien technology that we have, and to pay $20, $40 a month, it's really cheap. But the tough part about AI, I think, is like when you're trying to create something new, it's really bad at like telling you things that just doesn't, like it's just like that's not common, right? So if I say like write me a like if I give a pretty simple if I give a pretty simple prompt, like it will give me all these things that like it seems very plausible, but some of you guys might have used this and like actually like just know that it just doesn't work really well. And that like if I copy paste this, I'll get all these different errors and whatnot, right? And so the way that I like to approach it this is just a quick tip, is I like to give it some context, right? So like, instead of what I did, which is just write and just give like a blank prompt. So I'm going to, that converts floats to strings. Here, but I like to give examples, right? Here's an example of another media pipe calculator that is not relevant in the content, but follow a structure. You can do this. And then now it's going to lower your error rate by a lot. And by the way, I think MediaPipe, it's writing in C++, but this applies to like Objective-C and even Swift. Now, here's a really fun thing that I like to do, which is I have two versions of this calculator, A and B. Compare both A and B, explain its pros and cons, and how to improve it. Write version C of what you learned. And then what I like to do is I'll feed in version A, and what GPT said in version A, and then I'll feed in what Claude said in version B. And then the fun thing here is I'll give this to GPT, and I'll also give it back to Claude. And then now what you really get is like you get these two versions of answers that kind of converge, and then you can just compare the diffs, and then you'll get something that's pretty much copy-pastable. So as somebody who doesn't know how to code, this is how I figured out how to navigate all these technical challenges. And so if anybody's working with novel technologies, right, like you're not sure how to go about it, then this is what I recommend. And so I can just copy these two, compare the diff, and then like for every single different line, then that's when I really sit down and just start thinking. You can use similar techniques for shaders. I think in the camera, when the previous photo and the new photo comparison was happening, you kind of saw the shader work. I don't know how to code shaders. Like I don't know if anybody really knows. But yeah, I mean, you can do all these different techniques where it's like you can ask it to write GLSL shaders first and then convert it to metal, because metal shader examples are just not, there's not that much data about it. And yeah, I mean, that's one, that's how I'm getting by. So that's my big secret to you all. Anyways, you know, there was several demos I showed, several thoughts I shared with you. But in the end, there are many ways to build a successful product. We just look at the world of tech, look at Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook. They all approached their software product in a very different manner, very different organizations, and they're all very successful. So there are many ways to succeed. But for me, I want to create experiences that are worth experiencing, because isn't that what life is about? And as builders, I think it is our privilege. I think we almost have a duty to paint such pictures for the world that we believe in. And so that's what I shared with you today. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer. And you can find me anytime at JAYHXMO.
Thank you very much. Very, very refreshing talk that we are not used to have here. But I hope, like me, everyone enjoyed it. I think we will cut the part where you're showing how everyone can be a developer. I think we'll not put this on YouTube. We don't want to, everyone steal our jobs like that. Anyway, any questions for Jay? Yeah.
Sorry for, thank you for the great speaking, Jay. And I just used this app, and could you collect the old photos in the server, or?
Yeah, so when we officially put it on the App Store, we'll write a real privacy policy. But for the test flight stuff, I mean, the inference is done on the server, so it does save the photo on the server, but we'll delete it. Obviously, we don't take photos from your photo library that you don't upload to the server.
So that means if the internet is not connected, you cannot use the AI, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I think that on-device diffusion inference is not good enough in that image model. Basically, you saw what Apple Intelligence was doing. That's pretty crazy that they were able to fit that into iPhones, but for the most part, I think everything that's out there in the world are using servers.
So I have another question that like you show the example that has no shoes, right? But I'm kind of curious that what happens if the photos doesn't have a face, for example, not just a body with no head. So is it actually generates the people's face? Or?
You know, that's actually so the shoe problem can also be applied to the face problem, right? If I took a photo of just your lower body without your face, it does attempt to generate the face, and it's pretty creepy. So like we kind of don't want people to do that, but no, it does try to generate a face.
So that means you tried it, right? Tried it, the headless pictures, right?
Of course, like that is in our test set where we're trying to see what ends up happening. Yeah, you basically get like pretty terrible results, and so like it's pretty unfortunate.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your nice presentation. And you actually, Jay Moore, you unemployed, you introduced, but it seems you're employed.
Self-employed, aka unemployed.
Oh, yeah, self-employed, yeah. And I would like to push forward that I understood you on the presentation. Your presentation is regarding the cloud software, the correct beautiful software in the AI. You introduced the cloud software,
Okay.
right?
Sorry, I didn't understand the.
Actually, today's presentation is cloud software, kind of AI assistant software you introduced today.
The app, yes, but the cameras. I mean, some of the demos are all locally offline, but specifically the Instagram Story app that's using a server, yes, it's on the cloud.
That is Instagram software to support those kind of, I don't know, rendering the picture, so what. I confused about what data, what is called the software. What is called the name of software you today you introduced? One software I'm not sure what software craft beautiful software in the AI? What software? What craft beautiful software? Beautiful software.
혹시 한국말로 다시
예.
얘기해 주실 수 있어요?
무엇이 크래프트? 그러니까 저기 아름다운 소프트웨어를 AI 이 시대에 만드냐? 무엇이? what? 그게 그거거든요. 그러니까는 여기 타이틀이 크래프팅 뷰티풀 소프트웨어 인 디 AI 이어라고 했는데
네.
무엇이 크래프트 뷰티풀 소프트웨어를 만드냐? 무엇이 크래프트가 하냐? 아름다운 소프트웨어.
그러니까 이제 제목에서는 크래프팅을 할 때 저희가 크래프트 이제 개발
무엇이 가공을 아름다운 소프트웨어 가공을 하느냐? 그거 내시는 거는 무엇이 가공을 아름다운 소프트웨어로 가공을 하느냐? 이 AI 시대에 그러니까 무엇이 가공을 하느냐? 크래프트 뷰티풀 소프트웨어. 그게
네.
개발자가 뭔가를 이용할 거 아니에요? 그 소프트웨어 그러니까는 뭐 인스타그램에서 이용을 하든 어디서 이용을 할 때 근데 개발자가 무엇을 이용을 해서 가공을 하느냐.
그 크래프팅을 하는 거는 저희가 코드를 통해서 하는 거, 코딩을 할 때
네.
이제 그냥 단순히 뭔가 목적 해결한다 이런 생각보다는 좀 더 디테일에 집중을 하고 좀 더 크래프팅 예술적이게 접근을 한다 약간 이런 표현이었던 것 같습니다.
저 어떤 소프트웨어를 이용하든 간에
그렇죠.
그러니까는 개발자 입장에서 그거를 이제 그 AI 시대에 맞는 그
네.
소프트웨어를 만든다는 얘기입니다. 그러니까 자기가 무슨 어떤 소프트웨어를 이용하든
네 그렇습니다.
그러니까 어프로치 자체를 AI 시대에 맞게끔 그러니까 최적화된 그러니까 어차피 이거는 사용자의 경험이 데이터가 축적된 데이터가
네.
그걸 이용해서 이제 개발자가 그거를 이제 구현하잖아요. 프로그램 랭귀지를 구현하는데 그러니까 어떤 소프트웨어가 아닌 거죠. 특정 어떤 소프트웨어를 이용한다는 건 아니네요.
네 오히려 마인드셋이라고 볼 수 있을 것 같습니다.
그러면 아까 처음 도입기에 클라우드라고 얘기했던 그 소프트웨어 지금 보니까는 그 앱스토어에 있어요. 그 소프트웨어가. 그 소프트웨어가 어떤 그런 AI적인 컨셉을 접근해서 개발자가 그 코딩하게 도와주는 거겠네요. 아까 그럼 어떤 도입기에서 그 클라우드를 왜 예를 들고 건가요? 클라우드 사용하시는 그거는
어떤 거를 얘기하시는지.
클라우드라는 소프트웨어를 아까 그 CLAOE라는 소프트웨어가 처음에 도입기에
아, 클라우드. 네네네. 네네.
그거를 했을 때 그 소프트웨어 자체는 그거는 왜 물어본 거죠? 그 소프트웨어.
제가 죄송합니다. 클라우드라고 잘못 이해를 했는데요.
예,
그
예.
클라우드는 챗 GPT라고 똑같은 거라고 보시면 됩니다. 그냥 제가 질문을 하면 응답을 해주는 거고, 근데 다만 제가 코딩을 못하니까 그 친구한테 물어보면.
그러니까 클로우드라고 하는
네, 그렇습니다.
클로우드, CLAD.
Yes.
그게 이제 일종의 챗 GPT 같은 그런.
네,
AI
똑같은 경쟁사라고 보실 수 있습니다.
이렇게 이해가 됐어요. 그러니까 개발자 입장에서 AI 시대에 맞게끔 소프트웨어를 코딩할 때 그걸 다발해서 하는 얘기예요.
네, 그렇습니다. Quick translation. He asked questions on like what tools were used to craft, and I think I was answering that like it's more about the mentality. And then some questions about like what Claude is, and I just answered that's a ChatGPT competitor.
Cloud, CLAUDE, not CLOUD.
Yes.
I understood that. I didn't. Okay. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I was just wondering, I'm mainly a back-end developer. What can I do? What have you seen that's making experiences easier with AI, and what are we doing wrong when we're sort of quickly making something as, say, a back-end developer, quickly making a front-end or a client experience? What would you say? How can we do a better job?
Sorry, you said you were a backend engineer?
That's my main thing, yeah.
I see. Well, I mean, obviously you can make things faster, like that'd be great, but I think yeah, there's a couple things, and I'll just ramble without the fully structured thought. I think the first thing is that just the design of the whole experience, right? And that's not just the interface. That's also just the way the code is done. It just feels like a lot of AI apps today are thought of in the sense of like, all right, like we have this AI model which has an input and an output, and let's say the input is like an image, and then the output is like a transformed image. How do we create an interface where we just allow users to input and get the output, right? It kind of seems like that's one mental model where a lot of people are approaching from, and that's where a lot of the technical decisions are coming out. Where I don't know if that leads to the best user experience. So that's one. I think just like that mentality of just like, trying to think about what the user experience should be first, and then connecting that to the actual model, right? So I think there's one thing there, and from that principle, I think what comes out is like an example that I can think of is like a lot of apps give feedback. So let's say like it's like a I don't know what you call this. There's a phrase for this, but it's like, let's say you're on a social media app and then you press like, right? And then it sends a request to a server to say, hey, this user liked it, and it probably sends like a confirmation that like, hey, like this was successfully liked. The best way to create this user experience is like you just assume that the like was successful, and if it was unsuccessful, then you handle it afterwards, right? But a lot of client apps a lot of apps today send the like request, wait for the server, and then display that to the user. So I think that's an example of like both client and front end where both client and server where you can, just optimize everything, try to just assume that it's the best case scenario and then handle it afterwards. So that's one example that comes to me. But obviously, it's that's a very good question. I don't know how to write backend code. All the stuff here, I did write the servers, but that was 80% GPT and Claude. So I will think about that question more.
Thank you.
maybe on top of that, there is one behavior that have been existing for a lot of time, but actually a lot of people just noticed it with the appearance of ChatGPT and Claude. Is like, instead of, you write, oh, write me this Shakespeare poem or whatnot, instead of waiting 10 seconds to get the full text, you now have this stream of words coming one
Sure.
after the other. That, what you explained us today is like the delight is in the details. So instead of waiting 10 seconds, we have this flow, so we can start reading, and then the poem or the text get completed. And this is actually coming from the backend. This is something that
Yes.
they can implement like straight away, like this stream flow of receiving the data. So maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good example. But it also reminds me, I did have a demo for that, but I fell asleep early last night, so I didn't get to finish it. So maybe next time.
No problem.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone? I have one actually. So I think if you present this talk in a room full of developers, you will make a lot of enemies, because I think a lot of people, when you show what you showed in the demo, they were like, how the hell can I implement this in code? Like all those animations and everything. So I think I don't know in the app on the app. So are you working? Did you write the code? Like even if it's with ChatGPT or Claude, or is there someone as your friend or teammate that is actually implementing more code? But I wanted to know, like, and maybe from your past experience, is there a way that you come to talk to developers with a certain, like, okay, this is what we'll do, don't panic, I know it,
Yeah.
So I want to know more about your approach as a non-developer, but more as a creative person. How
Sure.
do you handle talking to like pure engineer, pure technical person that have maybe a mind way different of yours?
Sure. All right, full honesty, half of the demos that you saw were not actual real iOS demos. They were basically videos, right?
So that's why you make even more enemies. Because if you're
Like-
looking to back you up, like code, like people will say, yeah, but it's easy in the video, just drag it.
Hey, no, but to be fair, it is an interactive prototype with logic, right? That actually, if somebody had asked you to write it just like in like an English step-by-step instruction, I could write it. If code it in Swift, I probably wouldn't. So that's why I'm like, usually my principle is like, if I can't write all of the details of the animation and implement in a prototyping tool, like that's not feasible. That's generally my principle, right? And I just want to like quickly touch upon like what I mean by that, right? So for the animation that you just saw with the this one, right? Basically, I'm using this like node-based tool to explain the logic to this visual prototyping tool that was built by Facebook, and so that's and so yeah, like a lot of demos that you saw are actually built in Swift, because if I had to build it in Swift, it would take me many weeks before I could even figure out that's a good idea or not, right? And so even this one, right? Like all right, it's loading. Even this one, the one that you saw with the whole swipe prototype, right? It's all not in Swift. Anyways, yeah, so I think that's just the first disclaimer there. And then I think your question was around how do I talk to...
How do you, because through my career, I think most people know about, or you have sales-led companies and product-led companies.
Sure.
But even in the product-led companies, you have two kinds of companies that I've seen. The design-led company, meaning that if the developer team and the design team have some kind of a conflict, the design team win, because that's the
Yes.
that's the motto of the company. And on the opposite side, if two have like an issue, the engineering team, depending who is stronger, mostly depending on the C-level type.
Yes.
So what's your take on that as well?
Am I answering this from the perspective of a designer or from one of the engineers?
Like yours, what do you think is best for the product as a whole, for the company as a whole? Do you
I
think
see.
having creative people let them do their
Sure.
job and engineers should follow, or the opposite? Like, how do you see that?
How many people here can relate to that situation in your current day job?
Who is fighting with the designers? That was easy.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, this is terrible advice, but my recommendation would be to leave. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, no, but yeah, I mean, it's I think you need to like more serious answer. You probably need to think from what is the right thing to do for the company and how should that manifest in the product. And so you can look at, like, if you're building a B2B SaaS company or product, and the only financial incentive, like most of the financial incentive is just coming from like contract deals that the sales team is going out. Like, it's going to be pretty hard for you to go out, convince your product people, your executives to suddenly start hiring all these design engineers and start spending all these hours on design just so that like it feels better. Like, that's going to be very hard, right? Like, just unless the founders were like designers and like they just really believe in it, it's hard. But let's say you're building a consumer app where all your competitors are very high in terms of like the standards that they have, then like you have much more of a case. So I think like there is a reality where it's like you should be honest about, does the company need what you're trying to do? And if the answer is no, like that's what I mean by like, if that's the work that you want to pursue, like there's a conflict of interest, you're not going to do what's best for the company. So that's why I just think that it's a little bit of a hard ground there. But let's say you're building a consumer app, you believe that it's it should have very high standard of craft, really great experiences, and just people are not motivated by it, right? I think that one way to approach is this beautiful quote that I love, which is that a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. A prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So you should figure out, somehow make allies in the company, whoever can buy into your vision, build some prototypes and get people to buy in by playing with the actual thing. And maybe you can fake it like this and be like, hey, I made this thing, and like people will believe that it's already made. But I think that's probably the best thing, which is you need to actually paint the picture for them by doing the work. And if you don't have a single ally in the company, I think that's another problem.
Any other questions? No? Or more, maybe? So I you presented a lot of apps, so and you presented also something on the test slide. So that's why I'm asking more like business questions a little bit, or
Yeah.
at least product questions, even if it's outside of iOS. I feel in the service that you're working on, that is on the App Store, these animations are core of the product. Without you're actually trying to solve an existing problem. These apps out there, they are too boring and so on. So that's core of your business, to make
Sure.
something a delight experience, to provide delight experience. But for any other services like that you can think of, at what stage of the building process would you say, oh guys, we should be creative, we should actually give some good experience? Because most people, when they start a new product, what they want is something to work, and then
Sure.
at the later stage, oh, how can we make these better? How can we make these more delightful to use? But in your perspective, when should we start thinking about those little details that can make a difference?
So like I said, there are many ways to build a product and be successful. And the way that I go about it is very particular and probably very unpopular when you look at like Y Combinator and like all their playbooks for going 0 to 1 and just like shipping incomplete things and trying to validate the idea first and all these things. So I think when it comes to like, hey, like at what point should you start like those things, right? Like the craft, the details, the delight. Yeah, obviously it's very contextual, depends. Like if you really don't, it depends on like how much conviction you have in like your product market fit. It depends on like what other existential crises that you have. It depends on if, like you said, if craft is actually something that consumers expect and will care about and notice. But I think that and so it's very contextual. But to me, I just want to say that like craft, design engineering, that is more of a mindset that you can't just like retrospectively just like add in like a topping. You know, it's not just about the animations. I think they're, you know, the animations, the interactions, they're in service to the different mental models and experiences that you're trying to create. And if you've already architected something from the bottom up and you try to apply all of those things retrospectively, it's going to be a very, very hard time. Now, I'm not saying that it's not impossible. Like, it's not impossible. Like, it has been done, but usually, like, you know, you look at companies that started with very poor design, like very poor experiences, and like how many of them actually end up becoming transformed, right? It's very hard. So for me, the way I believe it is just it's a mindset. It's very hard to change your own mindset, let alone like an entire company's like DNA and mindset. So even if you deprioritize in the beginning, I think it needs to be something that's core to your heart. Otherwise, you know, it's not something that you can always logically justify, right? It's more of a values thing.
What about Craigslist then?
Yeah, I mean, it's like yeah.
Oh, okay. I see. Asking more questions, bring more questions.
한국말로 해서 해보세요, 편하게.
네.
네. 그
Don't worry, everybody. I will translate.
개발자 입장에서 그 AI 시대에 적합한 그 소프트웨어를 개발하는 거 했을 때 딱 한 단어로 어떻게 AI 시대에 맞는 소프트웨어가 어때야 된다. 딱 한마디로 한다면
He's asking for like one phrase or one word to summarize the whole engineer's approach in the AI era.
AI 시대에 적합한 소프트웨어는 어때야 된다. 이런 한마디로
I think it's the same. I think it's the same. I think that we like to categorize things, so we always call all these like, hey, here's an AI startup, here's an AI company, and we say all these things, but to me it's the same. When I say it's the same, I mean that like the core principles of software is not different, right? Like you're trying to build the best possible experience for the user. Hopefully they pay for it. Hopefully your business does well as a result. And it just happens to be that like we just have compute that just takes a little longer. That is more capable and powerful because it can understand people. Maybe unit economics is a little harder because server costs and whatnot, and you know there's a little bit of a different dynamic. But I think the core of building a software is the same. Like you still want to build something that scales. You still want something that you know, that really solves the user's problem. So at the core of it, it's the same.
일반 지금까지 우리들이 과학도 소프트웨어나 AI나 다 똑같은 그런
네, 본질적인 거는 차이가 없는 것 같습니다.
데이터만 이제 AI 데이터, 이제 이런 게 적합한 데이터하고 차이점이 있는 거에는 수사단의 데이터는
데이터도 있고 뭐 기술적으로 뭐 더 오래 걸리는 그런 뭐 더 오래 기다려야 되거나 뭐 그런 것들은 있겠지만 네, 본질적인 거는 똑같은 것 같습니다.
Any last question? Okay, on the last word, any tips or advice for us engineers to be more creative at our daily tasks? Any, you know, where do you find inspiration when you find something that can help us craft better product?
I mean, that's why I'm here, to learn from you guys.
So we could watch and rewatch the talk on YouTube later on. That's the catch.
Well, I mean, I think it's what you create is bounded by your imagination, and your imagination is bounded by what you feel like you can do. And so, for me, for a while before I picked up basically this whole like GPT Claude manipulation tactics, like I just never dared to do anything, right? And so, you know, I would just love, for me personally, I would love to pick up new technologies like metal shaders and get really good at it, and like that opens up a whole new world of imaginations and whatnot. So I think it's just, you know, having the right building blocks, imagining off of those building blocks, and if anybody is interested in shaders as well, please let me know, because I need some help.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you.